Hello, this is Dr. Larry Widman, sometimes known as Doc in the mindset world. I am here today to take you on a journey of what I call the 7 innings of mental health and mindset training, of what I hope to be educational, inspirational, and more importantly, a chance to give you some tools to take care of some really important things if you want to be great in sports, and you want to be great in life. And I think you can see behind me a lot of pictures, a lot of memorabilia. It's Paige Reasoner. I'm going to get into her story a little bit here, obviously, and share who she is and what she's about. And I'm going to use a PowerPoint and lots of videos from different athletes and teams from a variety of sports. Certainly, I'm going to have a little bit of a focus on softball. I use a lot of athletes in the volleyball world because that's the world I know, but it's going to be scattered with baseball and football and basketball and track and field and a variety of elite athletes and teams, helping to validate what we're talking about. And that is, how do you address and take care of your mental health needs? And how do you develop an elite mindset to be great in your life and to be great in sport? So I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint. My goal today is to prepare your mind and your team for battle, to max out your mind and max out your team. And, I'm a psychiatrist by trade, which means I went to medical school, but then specialized in psychiatry. So part of my life is taking care of mental health conditions. As we'll get into, I don't do that when I work with elite teams and athletes and coaches. This whole presentation is supported by the Play for Page 33 Foundation, which I'm going to get into. It was started by Jason and Barb Reasoner on behalf of her daughter, Paige Reasoner. They're all about taking care of mental health, particularly for student athletes. Paige was a softball player about ready to start her freshman year at the University of Sioux Falls when she took her life. Here's what I can tell you about Paige, and you can see her pictures behind me, memorabilia, some of the family's favorite pictures. You can see a candy bowl behind me because she used to give out candy to everybody that was having a bad day. And she was really a fierce competitor, but she also dealt with a very tough opponent, depression and anxiety. And she ultimately lost her life to suicide March 30th of 2022. And it was shortly after that that Jason and Barb, her parents, started the Play for Page 33 Foundation. And anybody who's had somebody pass from suicide or other life circumstances know that, you could go one of two ways. Jason and Barb could have, in a way, given up on life, shut down incredibly, and they immediately went into action because they didn't want anybody else to have to go through what they did. And their mission is to help spread awareness about mental health, particularly for students and student athletes, so that they know they're not alone, that there are others fighting the same battles. And they want to provide tools for parents and coaches to help them recognize and support athletes who may be struggling with such things as depression and anxiety. And that's part of what this whole video series is about. What's really cool and inspiring that is over 100 people to date. And every day, people message the Reasoners to let them know that Paige's story gave them the courage to ask for help. And many of them have said specifically that Paige saved their life. And that's pretty powerful, even though Paige's life was not spared, that she goes on to continue to help others. And I feel like she's with me today in this room is all I can tell you. So as we get started on this journey, it's really important to me to make sure that you understand that you're not alone. And no matter how bad things get, that nothing is permanent. Here's some pictures of Paige closer up just to give you a feel for her spirit, her intensity. She had it all. But depression and anxiety are a tough opponent. If you want to follow me, I tend to be on Twitter, Doc_Elite Mind. We have some really cool people on our podcast called the Max Out Mindset Podcast. A lot of great coaches and athletes in all sports. We got a great book called Max Out Mindset with a workbook. We have a Max Out Mindset for volleyball book and workbook out, and the Max Out Mindset for softball book and workbook are going to be out here You'll see some videos in here today with one of my partners. She's a superstar in the elite mindset world. Her name's Jess Connect. She's a coach at heart, but boy, does she know how to train mindset with elite teams and especially high school and college athletes. So you're going to see her throughout this as well. So I wanted you to see who she is. I'm really proud of Jess and her growth. The 7 innings of mental health and mindset training. We're going to go through each inning at a time to represent the softball world, but it can really represent anything you want. As this is just not about softball. This is really for any elite team, coach, or athlete or person. So we're going to talk about preparing your mind for battle in a couple sessions. We're going to talk about maxing out your mind in a few sessions. And then we're going to talk about maxing out your team. And of course, you notice extra innings where we really get into things such as role acceptance, building deeper relationships, vulnerability, and ultimate trust. So I hope it's a great journey for you. You can use it any way you want. You can watch an inning at a time. You can watch more than one inning. You can break up an inning and see that over a few sessions. I'm going to ask a lot of questions where you could pause the video if you would like to talk about it as a team. I'm going to give my answer, but I'll give you a chance to pause the video so that you can discuss it on your own first. Some other goals regarding mental health and mindset. Really want to emphasize education and awareness about mindset training and its role in overall performance and mental health because they intersect. And of course, I want to reduce the shame and stigma regarding mental health care and give strategies to attack a mental health injury like any physical injury. You'll see where I got this notion to attack a mental health injury from Alexi Pappas, track and field star, coming up in a bit. All right, inning number 1, preparing your mind for battle, part 1. Why we train in elite mindset, the power of the space, and the power of positive psychology. By the end of this inning, of course, I want you to be able to understand why are we here? Why are we training in elite mindset? But of course, we have to get into what we train and how we train it if you really truly want to have strategies to improve your life and improve your sport. My goals for every team. I don't care who it is, at what level. Of course, I want you to have no regrets. And what does that mean to me? It means that you can look yourself in the mirror and your teammates in the eye and know that you didn't cheat the process. You're able to tell them that, right? I did everything I said I was going to do within reason. Not perfect. And anyone who's played a sport knows the difference between having regret and not. There are times where you've done everything right and you or your team doesn't reach the goal that you set. And that's okay. That's life. But oftentimes when you reflect back, there's pride, there's satisfaction because you didn't have any regrets because you left it all out there. And there are times even when a team advances quite a ways, but you know, and the coaches know, and others know that you fell short of what you could have accomplished because you or people on the team cheated the process, cheated what you said you were going to do. And the pain of regret can be pretty powerful. So of course, I want to get a team to have no regrets, individually and collectively. Then of course, I want you to get to a point where you don't want to take your jerseys off when the season is over. And what I mean by that is that you've built the relationships to a point where you care about each other. You give anything to play with each other again. And I'm going to show you a couple cool videos to illustrate that. And then can you just put yourself in a position to max out when it matters the most? And that means training yourself physically and mentally to do so. And all I ask people to do is get in a position because maybe the team across from you also put themselves in a position to max out. And there are times where you've done everything and even your team maxing out may not be good enough to hold that final trophy. And that's okay. That's called life in sport. I'm going to start by showing you a video of Jocelyn Alo. She was being interviewed right after the University of Oklahoma won the national championship in softball in 2022. And listen to her message. And this has to do with not wanting to take your jerseys off and having no regrets and putting yourself in a position to max out.
Jocelyn, this has been a dream season for you. All of the hits, all of the home runs. How does it feel to cap it off with the national championship?
No better feeling. This is everything that we've worked for, and I'm so glad that I'm ending my career on top.
You had a unique curtain call out there in the field. What was it like when all of a sudden they're starting to hit balls right at you and you have to close out this game?
Yeah, I think everyone was kind of surprised, but I do practice defense at practice, so just go in there and getting the job done.
How did it feel as the crowd's love washed down on you?
I don't think anything will ever compare to that. I love this game, and I'm sad to be walking away from it, but I'm happy that I ended on top, and I'm just so blessed for this journey that God has blessed me with.
You didn't do it alone. Your teammates had your back. That hug and the love from all of you. How were you all there for each other?
We've always been there for each other, and we always go to battle for each other. It doesn't matter what the circumstances, if we're up 10 or behind 10, we're going to have each other's back no matter what.
The pitchers came in, they were a group. What did you think when you saw all three pitchers out there in the circle battling to end this game?
I knew they were going to come in and get the job done. There was no doubt in my mind that they were going to come in here and shut it out.
All of the awards, all of the accolades, now a national champion. What is the message you have to everybody at home watching in Hawaii?
I love you guys, and I just want to thank you for being on this journey with me, and to all the Hawaii girls and all little girls watching, anything is possible if you work hard. You can come and play on this stage if you just work hard and just stay the course. But just thank you for following me, and Jocelyn Alo signing out.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you.
There were a lot of emotions there with Jocelyn. You felt it. And boy, it combined everything. Whether it's the end of the season or end of your career, you really want to have no regrets. And you can tell she left it all out there, and how much the game has meant to her and how emotional and sad she is to be walking away. But to walk out on top is a pretty cool feeling. But more importantly, I think it's because their team put themselves in a position to max out. And you can tell that's a team that loved each other. All right, so I want to tell you another story here about not wanting to take your jerseys off. And I'm going to have another athlete in another sport, volleyball. Her name's Jordan Larson. People in the Midwest know her from a small town, Hooper, Nebraska. Arguably the best U.S. volleyball player of all time. Well, she happened to be on one of the greatest teams talent-wise, probably the most talented team in Nebraska history. There were 2 National Players of the Year on that team. Never happened before or since, because one had redshirted. Almost all of them were first-team All-Americans, and that team did not even reach the Final Four. If Jordan was standing here today, she would tell you our team was selfish and did not build the relationships necessary. The off-season was a struggle. Their star setter quit the team. The best player in school history to that point threw them under the bus in the local paper. And it was a really unsettled off-season. And that very next year, Jordan was going to be a senior. Her, along with 2 other homegrown seniors, they really wanted to do it differently. And they worked really hard on building relationships. They worked hard on all those non-technical skills of their sport. And their team slowly got better. And they got to play in what they call the regional final, or the Elite Eight. And they had to go face number 1 seeded Washington in Washington. Tough task. And Nebraska's down 2-0. They tie it up in sets 3 and 4. Set 5 is played to 15, and Nebraska is down 9-3. Anyone who plays that sport, or just, you can sense that's not a good space to be in. But Nebraska went on a crazy service run, went back and forth, and Jordan Larson had a miracle ace serve to pull off the upset. Jordan Larson's mom was ill with cancer at the time and couldn't be at the game, but she was at the hotel, but too sick to come. And so there was a lot going on that season. Their reward was get to come back to Nebraska, where the Final Four is being played in Omaha. And they had to play a team called Penn State, kind of one of the blue bloods in the volleyball world. And what's unique about this Penn State team is they were 36-0, and they swept everybody 108-0. Never happened before sets. Penn State takes sets 1 and 2. Nebraska takes sets 3 and 4, and they're actually up 10-8 in set 5. And the auditorium was just on fire. Penn State would go on to win that match. They would go on to win the finals in a sweep over Stanford to win the national championship. This is the first team at Nebraska I had been around, and I thought I remembered this, but I'm going to have Jordan Larson share her story.
And I didn't remember that until we literally had the reunion, and Amanda Gates is showing us all the picture. Hey guys, you remember we slept in our jerseys? And I was like, oh my gosh, we did. It really meant so much. And like to be able to do that and I think do it together. And the fact that everybody was on the same page, no matter if you were starting or not start, like, I think that's what makes it even cooler, right? Like it's not when you're not starting, like that's hard, right? But the fact that we had non-starters like wanting to buy into something and just like it was all hands on deck, you know? And you don't see that often. And I just think that just goes to show like the environment and team like we tried to create was just how can we get everybody involved, even if you aren't playing, you're still giving like an active role, right? I think that's what you saw on the Zoom call. We talked a lot about Jordan Wilberger, right? Corey Cooper goes down mid-season. Jordan Wilberger just steps right in like, all right, guys, I'm here. I'm going to do my thing, and hasn't really played that much up until this point and crushes it.
Pretty powerful stuff, right? And I say whether you're a 500 team or you win a national championship or a state championship, what a cool thing, right? So you heard a couple things there that I would have you challenge you to talk with your team about. A couple of messages. What did Jordan Larson share there that was unique about her team? Two things stood out to me. She said that everybody was valued on that team, non-starters and starters. She called it all hands on deck. And I tell teams so often, I don't know why more teams don't do it, to value everybody. And I say it starts with the coaches, the team leaders, the upperclassmen, the starters, to make sure that everyone feels valued on that team, whether they play a major role or don't play a major role in terms of competition. You will see a pattern of teams over the course of this series that do that. They value everybody, and it's really powerful. And because it's hard, if we're being honest, right? It's really, really hard. And it's never more hard than it when you get to college in particular, but because you're used to starting your whole life, and then some of you won't start. And she acknowledges that. And then she said something else, right? What was the second thing she talked about? What did Jordan Wilberger have to do? So Jordan Wilberger was a redshirt freshman. She had played minimal moments in her career, and then the only other experienced player on the team was Corey Cooper, and she went down mid-season with a knee injury. That happens in sport. But I always say that there's no way that she can come in and crush it, like Jordan Larson said about Jordan Wilberger, if you've checked out physically and mentally. You're sulking. You don't put the work in practice because you're not starting. You don't have the role you want. You have to put in that work so that when your number is called, you deliver. And there's nothing cooler in my experience. Dozens of stories of athletes who stepped up when least expected for their team, and it couldn't happen if they hadn't prepared. And then at the end of the day, you heard it. That team honestly slept in their jerseys. After the press conference, they didn't want to take them off. They woke up in their jerseys the next day because they had spent so much time being vulnerable and building relationships and accepting their roles and being selfless that they would have given anything to play together one more time. And that's my challenge for you. Those three things: no regrets, not wanting to take your jerseys off when the season's over, and putting yourself and your team in a position to max out when it matters the most. All right, so we're going to start by talking about the four legs of elite performance. And there's four of them. There's a mental leg, a physical leg, a technical leg, and a tactical leg. And I say, if you want to be great at anything, you want to be great in school, great at your job, great in your sport, you have to be working on all four of these. Now, every one of you will work on them in different ratios. Some of you need to work on certain ones more than others. But if we're not working on these each and every day and every week, as we talk through it, you'll see that it's going to be really hard to be great at what you do. Let's start at the bottom. The tactical leg is what I call watching film, studying the game plan, or what we call the scout. And so a couple things. I challenge you that if you're an experienced member of the team or a leader, to know the game plan or the scout that the coach shares with you better than you've ever known it, so that you know it so well that you can help anyone on the team that may not know it as well as you. And then, of course, challenge you to watch more film of yourself, doing really good things that you need to improve, watching film of your opponents, so that you have a full understanding of the strategy that your coaches are setting up and the own strategy that you develop. And then goal setting is also a part of the tactical leg of elite performance, both individual goals and team goals. All right, the technical leg is what I call skill mastery. That's all the skills of your sport. We'll stick with softball for now, right? That's pitching, that's throwing, that's batting, running the bases, understanding all of that. So I challenge you a couple of things. If you're great at something, don't give up on working on that. Work on it harder than ever. So play to your strengths. But also, there's at least one person in this room on average or more that has a loved one who means extremely well. And at the worst possible moment, they're going to tell you this: coach is playing favorites. You should be starting. You're the best shortstop on the team. I'm here to challenge you to not buy into that. Your loved ones mean well, but your coaches are almost always right. And even if they're not, the main goal is to understand from your coaches what are the 2 or 3 things that you need to do better to have a chance to get on the field. Not to buy in that you're already the best, but coach doesn't see it. But then, just so you know what I share with coaches, I share with coaches that please don't tell somebody, if you do this, this, and this in practice really well, I'm going to get you some playing time. And then they do all those things and there's no playing time. So I ask athletes, what does that do between athlete and coach when you do everything the coach asked of you and then they didn't do what they promised? And of course, athletes are pretty quick to say that breaks trust. And when I tell a coach, do you know you broke trust with so-and-so? That coach is so quick to go, that wasn't my intention. There's 2 reasons why they tend to do that. One is some don't like conflict, so they like to keep it vague. And I'm like, coaches, athletes want to know the truth. Be honest with them. The most common reason that a coach shares that with an athlete is they say, I want to give them hope. And I'm totally about hope, but it can't be false hope. It's got to be realistic. So if that athlete is behind an All-American or an All-State player or the best player in school history, it's okay to say to them, I need you to improve in these 2 or 3 areas for depth and for injuries and for the scout team and for next year. But even if you do all those things, it's going to be really hard to beat out so-and-so. That's a much better approach than telling them something that's probably not true. On the physical end, I talk about controllables. Sleep is our biggest performance enhancer. There are a lot of reasons that student athletes get into sleep debt, for example. I will ask teams to come up with a few reasons. And they can include things like, obviously, homework, stress, practice, travel. And of course, I remind them, if they're being honest, TikTok or social media gets in the way of some of you, right? But even if sleep has never been a problem for you because of these reasons, if you've ever struggled with sleep, you know how you feel. You don't focus as well. You're more emotional. You don't feel good. Same is true of coaches. University of California did a study looking at college athletes. If you got less than 8 hours of sleep versus more than 8 hours of sleep, the ones that got less than 8 hours of sleep were 70% more likely to get hurt in the coming year. Now, again, I wish if you just got your sleep, you couldn't get hurt. It doesn't work that way, but the odds go down, right? Diet. I talk about 2 things. If you want to get an A in your math test at 11 a.m. and you don't eat breakfast, I say you didn't fuel your brain for performance. That's how I think about it, well for your sport. I don't get caught up in weight or body comps and any of that stuff. You may, and that's okay. You may even choose to use an expert nutritionist, and that's great too. But I would rather have you learn how to fuel your unique body for performance. And it's different for all of you, depending on age, your role on the team, maybe what's expected that weekend. Maybe we play 2 or 3 games versus 1. Maybe you play the whole time versus part. But everyone has unique nutritional needs, and you've got to figure those out. And it changes sometimes as you get older, right? Strength and conditioning, I just remind you that if you want to be great at everything, you can't just be great at strength and conditioning. That's part of the physical. But sometimes I will ask teams, hey, who's the hardest worker on the team? And they'll point to so-and-so, and they'll say, nobody works harder in the gym or in the weight room. And I'll say, that's awesome. But if they're not sleeping, they're not paying attention to nutrition, they're not working on their extra skills or watching film, I say, well, that's just part of elite performance. So I put alcohol up there for 2 reasons. One, to tell you I'm not the alcohol police. I personally don't care if you drink, whether you're older or under 21. That's not my deal. But I do like you to think that when you're on a team, when you think we over me, What does it look like, especially if you're underage, but even if you're older, if I have a few drinks and get an MIP or DUI, or if I have a few drinks and have some embarrassing behaviors to get back to my team or coaches? And when you think we over me, sometimes you make a better decision for yourself and you choose not to drink. And that's true of anything. That could be true of drama on the team. Your choices, when you think we over me, sometimes you do things a lot differently. And then recovery, some of the things that college athletes and high school athletes struggle with is they hold back from their athletic trainer and their coaches when something's bothering them. So maybe they got a little calf ache, but they don't want to lose reps or minutes. They don't tell anybody. Next thing they'll have a calf ball. And I say that affects me, and then it affects we. Because it hurt you, it also hurts your team. And the great athletes are obsessed with recovery. Part of that's sleep, part of that's nutrition, but part of that is prehab and rehab and icing and doing all the little things to keep little ouchies from turning into something big. All right, on the mental side, it's two parts. It's developing an elite mindset, which we're going to get into, and it's also taking care of your mental health. And the rest of our time in this inning today is going to be spent focused on our mental health. It's what the Play for Paige Foundation's mission is. It's what my mission is. I want to share a story with you now. This takes me all the way back to my senior year in college at Washington University in St. Louis. I had just taken my MCATs, which was the test to be able to get into medical school. And that really set the stage for what I thought was going to be a pretty fun and special year with not as much pressure as the other pre-med years. And in that fall, a fraternity member of mine and very close friend by the name of Gary Gershon, who grew up in a suburb outside of Chicago, took his life by a shotgun very similar to Paige. And to be honest with you, it really rocked our world. For one, mental health wasn't really talked about that much back then, nor did we understand it all that much. And to this day, we still have no idea why Gary did what he did. But at the end of the day, it really threw us into a tizzy, and was a very upsetting time for all of us. But what I'll never forget is when his parents came to St. Louis, and the looks on their faces when I first saw them, and the devastation, and particularly from mother, who just kept asking us why, and how did we not know, or how did we not know he had purchased a gun? And, we were 21, 22 years old, and we didn't have any answers to her questions. And it was devastating. But it really took me back to their memories when I met the Reasoners for the first time, because the truth is, I had never heard of Paige Reasoner. She was a senior in high school when she took her life. She went to Scott Catholic High School. She was a softball player. Her parents, Barb and Jason, I had never heard of either and had not met. But after she had taken her life, I had a chance to meet them when I was talking with some softball clubs in Omaha about mental health and mindset. And they came and shared their story a little bit too, but I will never forget the looks on their faces either. Especially when we watched a video that you'll see later about them on the news. And it really took me back to a time that I probably had buried and hadn't thought about a lot in a while. And it was at that moment, as much as I had been doing for mindset and mental health, I knew I had to do more. And my mission really was aligned to what the Play for Paige 33 Foundation was, is that we are all about educating and providing awareness to student athletes in particular about the role that mindset and mental health plays. And that our mission was that we have to do better. We just simply have to do better. And I just think that's a really important message for you. And I want to make sure that you have the tools in your toolbox. And I say this, that even if you're blessed to never struggle with mental health, you should know the tools in your toolbox so that you can help others who may be in struggle with suggestions, ideas, provide them hope. And that's something I want to leave you with as we start to enter what I call the education phase from some other athletes here and other people that will potentially help you and your team on your journey to better mental health and well-being. All right. I always say, thank goodness that there are people with a platform that are willing to share their stories more than ever. Many of you know who Simone Biles is, arguably the greatest female athlete of all time, certainly the greatest gymnast. And prior to the Olympics in Tokyo, she really struggled. She's been pretty open about it. Some of that had to do with a doctor who did some really terrible things to her, but she was also had a lot of pressure in the Olympics. There's a lot of pressure being the face of the Olympics. And what she said was that we're human too, and we have emotions and feelings and things that we're working through behind the scenes that a lot of people don't know about. And but I say thank goodness for Simone and others, such as Michael Phelps, who's one of the first to talk about his struggles and has won more gold medals in swimming than anybody in history. And he's been open about his mental health and addiction issues. And again, I say every time someone like Simone or Michael talks about it, it reduces the shame and stigma a little bit. And it's aligned with my goals of trying to reduce that shame and stigma so that people will attack their mental health injury like they would any physical injury. So here's the reality. If you just study student athletes in the past year, 15 to 20% have reported clinical depression. 30% have had enough anxiety that they feel overwhelmed and struggle. But only about 10% of student athletes ask for help for their mental health condition. I think those odds have already started to go up a little bit, at least in my experience. In the college world, only about a half even knew where to access help. We've got to be able to do better than that. We simply have to. And I want to show you this. This is Jaden Centano, UNO volleyball player, played at Iowa State as well 2 years prior, 4-year starter. And it's going to be the first of a couple of videos I show you back to back to back here about the reality of being a student athlete and being able to be honest about our mental health.
I think a lot of the time as athletes, we hide what we feel because it's seen as weakness, you know. I'm not doing great, but I can't tell anybody that because then they're going to see me as weak or not confident. And I think as athletes, there's a huge stigma around like you can't speak how you feel. And I needed to get it out there. I needed to say something. I needed someone else to know what I was going through. So when I was able to do that with you, that's when I truly was like, okay, you know what, this is hard, but I'm going to get through this. And I have to get back out there for my team. I have to get that back out there for my well-being and my own confidence. And that's when I was like, I'm going to work my hardest and I will be better than I was before. And even a lot of coaches for college, because that's when you could recruit younger. Now you can't, but I was looking at different schools and a lot of them were like, oh, well, you got hurt. Like, maybe this isn't the right fit. And I was like, no, that is ridiculous. I will work my butt off and I will show you guys that it is like my goal is to play D1 athletics and I will do it.
All right, I'm going to show you another one. This is Lindsay Krause. She's going to be a junior at the University of Nebraska, playing volleyball as well. Grew up in Omaha. And the question that was asked of her, what does vulnerability look like? But let's listen to her answer.
I think vulnerability is not being afraid to tell someone that you're struggling with something, no matter what it is. I mean, I got to college, and honestly, I think a big part of my success is I started going to therapy. I think there's a big stigma around therapy and what it does and who it's for and all that stuff. Whereas I had some tough things that I had to go through when I was younger. You know, like my parents got divorced when I was really young. I didn't have the best relationships with my older brother. I kind of had issues with my younger brother and how he kind of got compared to me when he was younger. And then therefore that kind of caused a little bit of a rift in our relationship. But yeah, I kind of had to go through a lot when I was younger and it kind of affected the way I looked at things. And then therefore, I think when I was 18 and I made that decision to go see a psychologist, it's really important to know that things outside of volleyball affect you inside volleyball. And so like don't think that like just because it's not volleyball related, I'm gonna be able to like completely ignore it when I'm playing. Because that's just not the truth. And so it's really important to, it doesn't even have to be a licensed therapist, but just having someone that you can talk things through that happened um, in your life, like that's very important. And I think that was a big key to my success is I was able to talk things through if that's what's happened in my life and how I kind of project those things into volleyball. I got to notice that more, and then therefore I got to see when that happened, and then therefore control it. Because you can't control anything until you notice it and really understand why it's happening. Just like the same thing with composure. Like I'm not able to control my energy until I know how my energy works. I know that I'm a down regulator. So now that I know that about myself, I know how to stay composed. And then therefore, I now know how to control my projections into volleyball and what happens and my attitude and my energy, why that happens because of things that have happened outside of volleyball. And now that I see it, I'm able to control that.
And now I want to show you one more, then I want your team to discuss it a little bit. So this is Jordy Ball, softball player, had an incredible high school career at Pillion La Vista High School, and is in her sophomore year at the University of Oklahoma, where last year she was the National Freshman Player of the Year and the winning pitcher of the national title game. And just an absolute elite pitcher in this world. And so let's listen to what she has to say.
This fall was a really rough time for me, and honestly, probably one of the lowest points I've ever been at. And like I said, that voice that you have in your head, that's not you. The last thing it wants you to do is to shine a light on it and be like, I know you're there. I know what you are. And we're going to squash it and get rid of it. And I'm going to bring these people with me to help me silence you. But if you just sit there quietly and you don't say anything, it's just going to get louder and louder, and you're going to give it more power. And so taking the step of asking for help and admitting that there was a voice there is the first step to squashing it. And if you don't take that step, you're never going to squash it. So building up the courage to just take that step was really the first step in me gaining my confidence, my energy, my spark back, and honestly, just myself.
Okay, so I've shown you a series of videos. I think it would be great if you talked about it amongst your team a bit. But from my observation, let's start with Jaden. I mean, she flat out talked about it's hard because we're given this message that it's a sign of weakness if we need to ask for help as a student athlete growing up. And I think it's really powerful for her to say, I really had to make that decision. If I want to be great for me and my teammates, I have to let somebody know how I'm feeling. In her case, she was coming off an injury, and that was one of her challenges. But to be able to be open and honest and say, I recognize that it's hard, but I don't have to be ashamed about it. And then Lindsay Krause, her vulnerability and saying, look, things happen in our life. Everybody in this room brings with you a history to your team, high school, college, or beyond. Now, many of you may not have had that many life challenges. Even in Lindsay's case, it's not the worst trauma of all time to have an early divorce in her family, but anybody who's had a divorce knows that can be very, very difficult. And I think it's important to understand that we all bring our history and that it shapes the way we think and feel. Like she said, like in a perfect world, it'd be great if you could show up to practice every day. And we work on that to try to stay present. But things that happen outside your sport, they do affect you inside your sport because they affect the way you think about your teammates, your coaches, how you handle stress, and so many other factors depending on what's going on in your life. So, I think it's really important what Lindsay said, that what happens outside our sport does affect the way we think and feel within our sport. And then that there's no shame in seeing a therapist or a psychologist. You all don't need to see one. But in her case, it really helped her understand her life experiences and how they shaped her as a person and as an athlete. And then finally, Jordy Ball, to be able to say, look, she also was coming off an injury after they won the national championship and even leading into that national title game. And she had some struggle going into her sophomore year and being honest about it here this year and saying, But when I decided to reach out for help, it's where I got my confidence back. It's where I got my attitude and energy back. And so I think it's so important that you know you're not alone, that most elite athletes struggle with something, both either mindset or mental health or both. And that's what I really wanted to challenge you with, to be thinking about that. But what I hope it does is, between Simone and Michael and all these athletes we're watching, is it does make you recognize you're not alone in this. There's no shame or stigma in getting help. And so every time one of these athletes talk about it, I say, what a blessing for all of us.